Hey, hello everyone. So we'll go ahead and begin the webinar, and we've had quite a few registrants, and they should just be joining us as we go along this webinar. So again, welcome to Immigrant Integration, Assessing and Improving the Collective Response of the Catholic Church in the United States. Our presentation is called U.S. Catholic Institutions and Immigrant Integration, Will the Church Rise to the Challenge? This webinar is brought to you by the Center for Migration Studies of New York. CMS is an educational institute and think tank devoted to the study of international migration, to the promotion of understanding between immigrants and receiving communities, and to public policies that safeguard the dignity and the rights of migrants, refugees, and newcomers. I'm Rachel Reyes, CMS's Communications Coordinator. For about 2.5 years, CMS has been engaged in what we have titled the Catholic Immigrant Integration Project, an initiative that examines whether Catholic institutions have maintained their special connection to immigrant communities in the United States and how they can strengthen their individual and collective work on immigrant integration. Our project is guided by a National Advisory Council comprised of more than 40 representatives from national and local service delivery and education networks, academic, research, and policymaking entities, pastoral, parish-based, and ethnic ministries, and immigrant communities. Since its start, CMS has convened the board for 2 annual gatherings and also gathered leaders and others for a national public conference. And CMS, in partnership with the Catholic Legal Immigration Network, also recently released a publication titled, the same as this presentation, U.S. Catholic Institutions and Immigrant Integration, Will the Church Rise to the Challenge? The book is available for order through CMS's website at cmsny.org. In addition, more information on the book and on this project can be found on our dedicated webpage, which is www.catholicimmigrant.cmsny.org. Our first presenter, Donald Kerwin, is CMS's Executive Director. He will introduce the project in more detail and discuss the role Catholic institutions play in fostering civic participation, improving educational outcomes, and promoting the socio-economic attainment of immigrants. Don will also outline the Catholic vision of integration and discuss the importance of immigrant leadership and participation in Catholic institutions. Our second presenter is Mary Gautier. Mary is a member of the project's advisory group and serves as Senior Research Associate for the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate. CARA is a national nonprofit Georgetown University affiliated research center that conducts social scientific studies for and about the Catholic Church. Mary will speak on the growing importance of immigrant and minority communities for the U.S. Catholic Church and the misalignment between the Church's institutional infrastructure and new immigrant communities. During the presentations, we will mute attendees. However, after their presentations, we will open the discussion to questions. If you have a working microphone or are joining us by telephone, you should be able to ask your question out loud. You can also type your question into the chat box located at the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen or on the side. And with that, I'll now pass the presentation to Don.
Well, thank you, Rachel, and thanks to all of you for being with us today. My particular thanks to Mary Gautier. CARA really does this terrifically important objective social science research for Catholic institutions and other religious institutions, and we're delighted she's agreed to join us. I also wanted to acknowledge Sister Sally Duffy, who's on the call. Sister Sally is joining this webinar after a long illness, and she's been a great mentor and guide and supporter of this project from the outset. And finally, my thanks to Brianna George, who's been central to this project, particularly in researching and documenting the Catholic ministries and programs with immigrants, which appear in our book. As Rachel said, we're here to speak about the Catholic Immigrant Integration Initiative. It's a bit of a deceiving title in the sense that we hope that this initiative becomes more ecumenical in the upcoming months and years. And we also use this word integration as a kind of placeholder word. We have a particular vision of integration, which we're still trying to fully enunciate. But basically, we mean integration in the sense of empowering immigrants, embracing their contributions, in their leadership in our institutions, promoting the success and flourishing in the broader society of immigrants, and working to create better communities based on the shared values which can be found, the core values which can be found in immigrant and in native communities and cultures. So we're not talking about integration in the sense of one-way assimilation into a dominant national culture. This project has resulted in a book, as Rachel said, titled Catholic Institutions and Immigrant Integration: Is the Church Rising to the Challenge? It was published by Lateran University Press last year. We view the book, I should say at the outset, not as a definitive statement, but as a building block regarding this challenge and the project that is addressing it. So the agenda for today is this. I'm going to introduce the initiative. Then I'm going to turn to Mary, and she's going to speak on the importance of immigrants to the Catholic Church, trends in migration, and opportunities and challenges for Catholic institutions. Then I'll cover some lessons from the Catholic Church's historical and current work with immigrants from the last 2 years of this project, and speak a little bit towards this issue of the Catholic vision of integration that we've been discussing. And then, as Rachel said, we'll have some questions and answers thereafter. One of the members of our advisory group, and this is a project that's really driven by an advisory group at this point, said that our work was nothing new to the Church. We were tackling a challenge that's been with the Church since its inception. And he spoke of an important moment in the Church, which is memorialized in the Acts, when a Gentile, a Roman centurion by the name of Cornelius, sought to be baptized. And this, of course, Gentile being baptized was very controversial at the time. And this was Peter's response, that top quote. And it paved the way for a universal church, and it's really kind of our marching orders. Because if it's true, and we're all children of God with equal dignity, that our challenge then is how to promote the full participation of everybody, immigrants and their progeny in particular, as part of this project, in Catholic institutions and in the larger society. So how to respond to the gifts, contributions, and leadership and needs of immigrants as the Church did in an earlier era. What we're doing is not new in the United States either, where most Catholic institutions were created in response to the needs of immigrants. And it really couldn't have been any other way, given our history as an immigrant church and a nation of immigrants. It's fair to say, I think, that certainly CMS and the people on the advisory group are mostly very proud of the work of Catholic institutions. But these institutions aren't supposed to be fixed in stone either. They're supposed to be responsive to the needs of those, particularly on the peripheries, which is how Pope Francis puts it. The Holy Father also cautions against Catholic institutions becoming useless in self-referential structures that are comprised of the privileged few. And this is his quote, "I dream of a missionary option capable of transforming everything and channeling that for the evangelization of today's world rather than for the Church's own self-preservation." We see this project as very consistent with that vision. So what the initiative asks is, have Catholic this is a negative way to put it, but have Catholic institutions lost their special connection to immigrant communities? Can they respond to the gifts, contributions, leadership and needs of immigrants as they once did? And how can they expand and strengthen their work in serving, empowering, and contributing to immigrant integration? This is the positive way to put it. The goals of the initiative are these. Our book recounts the Church's historical work with immigrants in the U.S., and it documents some very innovative programs and ministries that we have today, and it outlines a theological vision that underlies this work. We now hope to deepen and expand this work with the goal of making integration a unifying collective priority. And we have three particular areas of emphasis for the upcoming year. First, continued research and assessment of the work of faith-based institutions with immigrants. We have a growing group of scholars led by a CMS board member, Manuel Vasquez from the University of Florida, who've begun to meet on this priority. And we've brought Kyle Barron, who's a PhD candidate, to organize our work on integration benchmarks and metrics for Catholic institutions and to document some of the successful programs. So that's kind of our first priority. The second is we clearly need to hone the vision that underlies this work, knowing that with the right vision and with buy-in of that vision, that work will follow. And one of our advisors, Professor Hausman Espino, is working on a substantive paper on the theology of communion, which we think is part of that process and will be central to it. And then third, as I mentioned, we plan to continue to document, expand, and disseminate successful programs. This is really where the rubber meets the road, and it's our goal for the project. So the structure of the initiative is this. It's coordinated by CMS. It's directed by, at this point, working groups, which are devoted to research, to parish-based community organizing. We call it organizing for service, justice, and leadership, and to the development of integration metrics so we can measure our success. And it's guided by this advisory council. And as Rachel said, it's about 40 people who are leaders in different aspects of the church's work, whether hospitals or refugee programs or academia or Catholic charities, legal immigration programs, ethnic ministries, and on and on. Our next, for those who are interested in following this, our next large public event is likely to be in El Paso in the fall, and we'll have a place and a date soon for that. We're also going to continue to have dialogues and webinars on different aspects of this work. Some of you may have attended recent dialogues that we've offered on shared parishes with Brett Hoover and on parish-based organizing with Elena Segura of the Pastoral Migratoria project in Chicago. And you can find videos of these events on our website, as well as announcements about future project events. So before turning to Mary, I thought we'd provide some background on immigrants in the U.S., and this is going to provide some context for the trends that she'll discuss. And of course, these numbers kind of underlie the importance of this project, we think. So basically, we're living in an unprecedented era in terms of the number of foreign-born people in the United States. 41 million, maybe even a bit more than that right now. And another at least 17 million minor children of the foreign-born. And if you count the adult children of the foreign-born, of course, it would be higher. But this is a very high percentage of the U.S. population. These other numbers are the typical numbers that come in to the United States under the legal immigration system. These numbers are for 2013. Most of them each year, about 2/3, admitted on family-based visas. The next category, employment-based visas. But notice that only 5,000 visas are reserved each year for so-called unskilled, or what I'd rather call uncredentialed workers, because some of them are very skilled. And then then refugees and asylees who have been approved for a political asylum or have entered as refugees. They adjust to lawful permanent resident status, about 120,000 in 2013, diversity visas, and some others. Since this is very much in the news, I thought I'd talk about the unauthorized. We've done some research recently, the Center for Migration Studies, on the unauthorized, and they're often characterized in the public debate, as you know, as criminals. But what this shows is that they're parents, workers, long-term residents, and of course are co-religionists, and they're also on a track, a large percentage of them already, for lawful permanent resident status. So 4.4 million have qualified for a family-based visa. 14%, according to a recent survey that we've done, are eligible for permanent status but don't know it or haven't pursued it. It's a very long-term population, 1.9 million people here for 20 years or more. I mean, really, it's time to legalize them. I mean, it's absurd that people would be unauthorized for 20 years or more. 3.9 million are parents of U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents who would qualify for the DAPA program, and another 1.5 million who were brought to the U.S. as children who would qualify for the DACA program. They represent a disproportionate share of our workforce, 5.2%, and 28% are below the poverty line. So let me turn to Mary now to provide some research and some real social science substance to this presentation.
Great, thank you, Don. Let me just express my gratitude in being invited to participate in this webinar. We appreciate the opportunity to let the world know a little bit more of the Catholic context behind the numbers that you were just talking about. So let's put this in a Catholic context. As you said, the Catholic Church is a church of immigrants, always has been. In fact, 100 years ago, 3/4 of the U.S. Catholics came from just 6 immigrant groups. They were Irish, German, Italian, Polish, French Canadians, and Mexicans. That was the experience of a century ago. Those immigrant groups have assimilated into U.S. culture and done very, very well, and make up now the U.S. Catholic Church as we know it. The Catholic Church, though, continues to grow and is still a church of immigrants. But now, in the 20th century and 21st century, these immigrants are coming from Catholic populations around the world. We have Hispanics coming from Latin America and the Caribbean. We have Asians coming from Vietnam, the Philippines, and South Asia. We have Africans from the French-speaking parts of Africa. And since 1960, Hispanics alone have accounted for 71% of the growth in U.S. Catholics. There's been a huge influence on the Church in the United States. And in fact, just in the 5-year period between 2005 and 2010, according to some research that CARA did on U.S. Catholic parishes, Hispanics now comprise 40% of the growth in registered parishioners. Because, as you mentioned, Don, Hispanic immigrants tend to be a little bit younger. They come with families, and they are comprising more and more of the parishioners out there. Let's see, Rachel, can you give me access to the keyboard again? All right. Let me go back up one. There. And this Hispanic population is not equally distributed. This map shows the 2010 U.S. Census Hispanic populations. These aren't all Catholics, but they are certainly disproportionately Catholic. And you can see here that the Hispanic population is concentrated in the South and in the West, also in the major urban centers in the Northeast and around Chicago. So they figure these boundaries here are U.S. dioceses, and the dioceses that are in green and dark green, those are places that have a larger proportion of Hispanics than the overall proportion nationwide, so greater than 16% Hispanics. You can see Hispanics are concentrated in the South and in the West. Most Hispanics live in 9 states that have had very large, long-standing Latino communities, states such as Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Illinois, New Mexico, New Jersey, New York, and Texas, of course. But the share of Hispanics living in other states in the country has also been increasing. So the most of the growth in Hispanic Latino population has been in the West and the South. And this is also the place where a great deal of Catholic growth overall has been. Some of it due to Hispanic migration, but a lot of it due to migration of younger Catholics from the Northeast and the Midwest, the traditional immigrant population centers from a century ago, to the South and the West, from the Rust Belt, where the jobs were concentrated a century ago, to the Sun Belt, the states in the South and in the West, the suburbs outside of major cities. This is where the Catholic population, as well as the overall population in the U.S., has been migrating gradually out of the Rust Belt and into the Sun Belt, so that now, you see, compared to 1950, Catholics are almost equally distributed among the 4 census regions. It's about a quarter of the population living in the Northeast, where most of the Catholic infrastructure continues to be. The parishes, the schools, the colleges and seminaries. Those Catholic infrastructure are still concentrated up there. Okay, my mouse is a little sensitive, I guess. So in addition to migration out of the Northeast and out of the farms of the Midwest, another migration pattern that's been conspicuous in the U.S. among Catholics and others has been a migration pattern out of the urban core ethnic neighborhoods and into the suburbs. Catholics have been moving gradually away from the rural areas of the Midwest and into the suburbs around major cities in the South and the Southwest. In fact, just over the 10 years that are shown in this map here, between 2000 and 2010, Houston, Atlanta, Dallas-Fort Worth, all 3 increased by 25% or more just in that one decade in population. Now at the same time, 7 dioceses, you can see them all in red and orange in the states that are red and orange on this map. 7 dioceses have experienced loss in the number of parishes. As the population moves out and don't take their institutions with them, what ends up is that you have fewer and fewer people attending the parishes that were built for a previous generation, for an immigrant population 100 years ago. So those parishes in the Northeast and the Upper Midwest have been closing, and that's been in the news a lot. And the experience, the Catholic experience in some of those parts of the country has been one of great loss. 7 dioceses, as I said, had to close 50 or more parishes each between 2000 and 2010. Those dioceses include places such as Buffalo, New York, Scranton, Pennsylvania, Boston, Portland, Maine, Cleveland, Albany, New York, and Rochester. Each of those dioceses also experienced a net loss in their Catholic population between 8 and 16% during that 10-year period. By contrast, the states there that are in green are states that have had an increase in population and an increase in parishes. They've actually constructed some new parishes. So just for example, the Archdiocese of Atlanta, which is the north half of Georgia there, the Archdiocese of Atlanta built a parish a year, 10 new parishes between 2000 and 2010. a new parish every single year, which is phenomenal for a diocese. But at the same time, its Catholic population increased 259%. So even a new parish every year isn't enough to keep up with the demand. So the Archdiocese of Atlanta now has more than 10,000 Catholics per parish. And you can see similar trends in other states in the South and the West, particularly in the suburbs around these major cities. The point that I'm trying to make by this slide is that the Catholic population has realigned itself over the course of just a few generations. The people have moved on, but their parishes and schools don't. And so now, as a result of these parish closures, predominantly in the Northeast and the Midwest, and the fewer but larger parishes that are being built in the South and in the West, we now have about the same number of parishes today that we had in 1965, although the Catholic population itself has increased by 56% over that same time period. The challenge to the church then is many, many different cultures worshiping in much, much larger structures, cultural diversity every single Sunday. So parishes are increasingly called upon to offer their sacraments in languages other than English. 3 in 10 parishes now, that means more than 5,000 parishes, offer Mass at least once a month in a language other than English. And for more than 8 in 10 of those parishes, the language, of course, is Spanish, but many other languages as well. And this language diversity is experienced, obviously, more among parishes in the South and in the West, which are much more racially and ethnically diverse than those older parishes in the Midwest and in the Northeast. These parishes in the South and in the West are also larger on average than the parishes in the Midwest and the Northeast, and they average more Masses over the course of a weekend and other sacraments over the course of a typical weekend. These are very large, very complex, very diverse experiences, much different than the typical parish experience in the Northeast and the Midwest. So what does this mean for Hispanics in the Catholic Church? Well, as you can see from the top row there, Hispanics make up more than 50 million of the U.S. population. They make up almost 30 million Catholics. They are now 59% of Hispanics in the U.S. population are Catholic. This includes 67% of the foreign-born Hispanics in the U.S. are Catholic, and 54% of the native-born Hispanics in the U.S. are Catholic. That means then that Hispanics make up close to 4 in 10 of all U.S. adult Catholics. 58% of them are between the ages of 18 and 34. And 60% of the millennials who regularly attend Mass are Hispanic. 67% of the millennials who regularly attend Mass are Hispanic. So if we talk about immigrants as the future of the Church, then the question for us is, what are we doing with youth ministry and young adult ministry in all of our institutions to better attract and empower immigrants and their children and grandchildren? Because there is also here a rising second generation. If you think of the first generation as foreign-born and then the second generation, their children, and the generations after that. The first generation is projected to grow from 40 million, from 13% of the population in 2012, to 81.3 million, or 19% of the population by 2050. The second generation is expected to grow from 35 million, or 12% of the population, to 80 million, or 18% of the population by 2050. And you can see that particularly in the South and in the West, when you look at baptism compared to funerals, the rate of baptisms compared to the rate of funerals celebrated in parishes. So in the South and in the West, you have many times more baptisms than funerals. This indicates growth, parish growth, and population growth, much more than you see in the parishes in the Northeast and in the Midwest. And remember, the South and the West is where there's the fewest number of parishes. There's the fewest number of schools. There's very, very few Catholic colleges. The infrastructure is not there where the population is. Okay, Rachel, I need to move to the next slide. There we go. This slide illustrates the point, I think, pretty graphically about the mismatch in infrastructure. This is a county level map. That each of those little squares is a county, and you can see the counties in green are areas of high growth in Catholic population. This is just looking between 1950 and 2000. And again, it's the same story of Catholics moving out of the Northeast and into the South and the West. But look at each one of those little black dots on the screen there is a Catholic elementary school. You can see the Catholic elementary schools concentrated in the Northeast, concentrated around Chicago, concentrated in the cities and the urban areas where the parishes were, in where the population was. Well, in the past, Catholic institutions grew substantially, not in the areas in the times of mass migration, but grew in response to the needs of the second and third generation. And that's our challenge today. The Catholic elementary schools have been declining because they're concentrated in the areas where the Catholic population no longer exists. It costs a lot more to build a Catholic school today than it did 50 or 100 years ago. But the challenge is still there. The children, the Catholic children, don't live where the Catholic schools are located, and you can't leave a child on a waiting list for 30 years while you do a capital campaign to collect enough money to build a new school. So the challenge is, how do we address the educational needs of Hispanics and other immigrant population that's living where the institutions don't exist? And one of the points that I'd like to make relative to that is, Rachel, can you move me on to the next slide? Okay, is the realization that Hispanics in particular have had less access to Catholic schools, whether they're first generation or second generation. They've had less access to Catholic schools, and that makes a tremendous difference in terms of their understanding of Catholic culture, but it also makes a tremendous difference in terms of their outcomes in society. Hispanics who've had a Catholic school background are more more likely to have graduated college, more likely to have a higher socioeconomic status. Looking here, comparing just millennials, those Catholics born in 1981 or later, you can see that non-Hispanic millennials are 4 in 10 of them have attended a Catholic elementary school, very similar to the numbers of their generations before them. But look at millennial Catholic, Hispanic millennial Catholics. Only 17% have attended a Catholic elementary school. Similar that their generations before them have had less access to Catholic schools. Catholic high schools, it's even worse. 1 in 5 millennial non-Hispanic Catholics has attended a Catholic high school, but less than 1 in 10 Hispanic Catholics. And attendance at a Catholic college or university is virtually unheard of. 1% of Hispanic millennials has attended a Catholic college or university. This is a challenge to us as a society. So we do have Catholic institutions, and they do substantially serve immigrants, just as they always have. But the challenge is to meet the needs of the immigrants where they are, which is not necessarily where our institutions are. We need to find ways to renew and vitalize the institutions by empowering the immigrants out there and recognizing their contributions. So one of the challenges here is only, as the Notre Dame Task Force cited in 2009, only 3% of Latino children attended Catholic schools in 2009. All right, Don, let me turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Mary. So the question is, we've heard a lot about the importance of immigrants to Catholic institutions and in general to U.S. society. But what about Catholic institutions? What can they offer to immigrant communities? And I guess, do they still matter is a direct way of asking that question. And our answer, of course, is yes, they still do matter. And just to provide some general statistics here, Catholic hospitals and healthcare centers serve 93 million people per year. The Catholic legal immigration programs that are supported by Clinic represent 250,000 people per year, and the Catholic resettlement programs that are supported by Migration Refugee Services resettle 16,000 refugees per year. There's 18,000, although parishes have declined, as Mary mentioned, in some places. There's still 18,000 Catholic parishes, and they provide a range of course, pastoral services, but also quite significant social services as well. The Catholic Charities Network serves 1 in 10 people in poverty, and more than 1.4 million attend Catholic elementary school, 600,000 high school, and 940,000 Catholic colleges. So the point here is that Catholic institutions are not in some kind of death spiral. They're badly needed, and based on the history of these institutions, they'll be particularly needed by the second and third generations. When I'm in New York, I stay in Brooklyn, and the Diocese of Brooklyn celebrates Masses in 30 languages each week, which is remarkable. But the response needs to be general and collective across Catholic institutions in terms of support for immigrants. So lessons from several themes have emerged from our research and from our first 2 years of this project on how to strengthen the work of faith communities with immigrants. And here are a few of them, some of the big takeaways. One, ecclesial integration, that is, involvement of immigrants in the life of the church itself, is vital to the church's success at integrating immigrants into the broader society. It's also vital to the success of those institutions. Hoffman-Espino's research has shown that proportional Hispanic leadership, proportional that is to the population of a parish, leads to increased registration, more parental involvement in faith formation, and greater stability. It's also kind of a tried and true fact that the interrelationship between culture and respect for immigrant culture, respect for immigrant religious practices, and faith go hand in hand, and that's central to putting immigrants front and center in our institutions. This, you know, in the 1940s and 50s, the church sponsored literally hundreds of labor schools which dealt with how to be active in labor unions, parliamentary procedures, Catholic social teaching, and the like. It was a major ministry of church institutions at the time, and they kind of disappeared and have disappeared in the 70s and 80s and thereafter. And what we're seeing is a reemergence of labor priests and ministries now. You might think about worker centers, which operate in some parishes, as a new kind of labor school. But the basic point is that the church very clearly needs to reach the workplace, which is where most immigrants can be found most of the time, and that's a clear priority. And then I think in terms of just the work of, say, a Catholic charities or of Catholic institutions on a local level, their ability to promote integration and to deliver integration to immigrants really depends on their success at integrating their diverse programs and ministries. This is a major theme, and I thought I would just lift it up. The Catholic Church in the U.S. was really built on the vision, and particularly these institutions that we're talking about, on the vision, on the work, the labor, and the sense of community of women. And this is not just true, as these other quotes indicate, not just true in the U.S., but it's true elsewhere too. I heard Sister Patricia, who's Nigerian, and Sister Rosita, who's Brazilian, speak at the World Congress for the Pastoral Care of Migrants this last fall in Rome, and I was really surprised at the similar challenges facing immigrants and church institutions from around the world. But in the United States, it's quite clear that vowed religious women, they're the ones that staffed and built these schools, hospitals, orphanages, charities, and other institutions. And we need to find a way to do that now. So the question is Catholic teaching still relevant on these issues? I mean, one way to answer that question is to say, well, Catholic teaching, of course it is, because Catholic teaching is designed to be relevant. What it does is it discerns the signs of the times and it applies core biblical values to them to provide guidance on contemporary issues like immigration, for example. Another way to answer that question is to say, look at these issues. Do they look like they're dated issues? I mean, all of these issues which were raised up in the bishop's program of social reconstruction in 1919, and a lot of this stuff paved the way for the New Deal reforms. All of these issues are still relevant today, and of course the church's public policy and direct service work with immigrants has been particularly courageous and strong. So Catholic teaching and faith-based communities more broadly have a lot to offer still. What are some of the values that underlie this work? Well, hospitality is a core biblical value, but it's not about one dominant group incorporating newcomers. It's about providing a place and a home for everybody, and that's been a very strong theme of our gathering so far. Again, I heard this quote from Cardinal Tagle from the Philippines at the meeting in Rome. No country is a host. God is the host. Everybody else is a traveler, steward, or guest. everybody, that's immigrants and natives. And again, this theme argues for the full participation in Catholic institutions and other faith-based institutions, and indeed the ownership of these institutions by immigrants. The theme of communion, again, we're having Professor Espino write on this for us because we think it's an underlying theme that drives a lot of the work of faith communities with immigrants. There's so much scapegoating of immigrants in our public life and treating them as others, but this really isn't our vision. In the Catholic Church, the mission of the Church is to gather God's scattered children together. There's no strangers or sojourners. We're all fellow citizens and members of the household of God. And communion doesn't, of course, I guess communion is broader than just the standard socio-economic metrics of integration. We have a far more expansive view of integration than that. And here are some themes in this slide. This slide is meant to lift up some themes that underlie how the Church views integration. The theme of building communion based on shared values, core values, life-giving values. The call to humanize not just newcomer cultures, but to humanize and to evangelize native and newcomer cultures and lift up what's good in both and create something better. The idea of the common good and creating the conditions which will allow everybody in society to flourish. And then respect for immigrant agency throughout this whole process. It's immigrants that integrate. It's not institutions ultimately that integrate. Institutions can help. They can mediate with the larger society and the like, but it's the immigrants that take the lead and that actually integrate. And this is a fairly obvious point for, I hope, everybody on the call, but communion doesn't turn on immigration status. I think this next bullet is fairly important too, that in building communion and community, we're recognizing the sense of displacement and marginalization that immigrants experience, and this came out pretty clearly from our event on shared parishes, but that sometimes natives feel as well. Sometimes they feel displaced as well, and they feel threatened by immigration for that reason. And a very interesting theme of the event we had with Elena Segura on Pastoral Migratoria last week was that integration occurs through service, through works of social justice, and through leadership development in immigrant communities, and that we might think about that kind of work as a form of evangelization, which I think is a very beautiful vision. Again, please watch those videos of those events, which can be found on our website. And then finally, many people in our public life, many people in our societies treat immigrants as a burden or a danger. And it's really not the Catholic vision. After we announced this event, Father Lidio Tomasi, who's one of the founders of the Center for Migration Studies, wrote us with two questions. He said, does the church save immigrants, comma, or do immigrants save the church? And I think the answer to those questions is both. And the Holy Father would say both. And here's what he says, and I think it's worth reading, and it's probably going to be the quote that I end every webinar and talk with on these issues, because I think it's so powerful. He says, migrants and refugees are an occasion that Providence gives us to build a more just society, a more perfect democracy, a more united country, a more fraternal world, and a more open and evangelical Christian community. Migration can offer possibilities for a new evangelization, vistas for the growth of a new humanity foreshadowed in the Paschal mystery, a humanity for which every foreign country is a homeland, and every homeland is a foreign country. So not a burden, not a danger, but a gift sent to us to create a better society, to create a better Christian community. That's the vision that underlies this work. And again, I think once we get the vision correct, that the good work necessarily follows. So let me stop there. This is the information on how to order the book if you're interested, or to learn more about the Catholic Immigrant Integration Initiative. And I will turn it back over to Rachel for moderating some of the questions that people might have.
Hi everyone. So I will be unmuting everybody. Oh, though if you do have, if you know that there's some sound in the background that might, sorry, let me just try to unmute everyone. Okay. In any event, while I'm trying to do this, please feel free to also add questions to the chat box, which it should be located at the bottom of your screen or on the side, depending on how you're accessing this webinar. And I'm having a little bit of problems trying to unmute everyone. So in the meantime, please go ahead and chat your questions.
Okay, so we're not. Anybody have any questions? Okay, I think we're not seeing any and we're not hearing any, so we're just about at the end of our hour any which way. Please, feel free to email either of us, and move this up. That's me, and this is Mary. So please do contact us and look on the CMS website for more information about the project, and we hope that you participated in some way and that you'll follow it as well. And since we're practically at an hour at this point, I think we'll end the webinar, and thank you all for joining us, and again, thanks to Mary for her presentation.
Thank you.